tonight on how the Muslim Brotherhood front groups are stifling freedom of speech, intimidating business, and stealing American freedom. Now, you probably see a videotape over here. Don't worry, we're not being videotaped in the audience, so if you have any kind of concerns about that, you happen to hear the Supreme Court ruling today about the IRS, and not Supreme Court, but the District Court's ruling, but we're not videotaping you guys, so it's okay. Deborah Weiss works for Vigilance, and it's an organization dedicated to educating the public on national security-related issues, where she specializes in UN resolutions promoted by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Previously, she was the Manhattan Director for the Forbes for President campaign, served as a counsel for the Committee on House Oversight in Congress, and worked as an assistant corporation counsel in the Giuliani administration. She's a contributing author to the book Saudi Arabia and the Global Islamic Terrorist Network, and she's the principal writer and researcher of the book Council on American Islamic Relations, its use of lawfare and intimidation. She's a regular contributor to David Horowitz's Front Page magazine and has additionally been published in the National Review Online, the Weekly Standard, the Washington Times, Front Page magazine, American Thinker, and the American Security Council Foundation, and other publications. Thank you very much, and welcome.
First, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. And I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your schedules to educate yourselves on this important topic. I'm going to be talking to you about Muslim Brotherhood Front Group and basically how they're trying to steal American freedom without you knowing it. I am a 9/11 survivor from the World Trade Center attacks in New York City. Both my home and my office were affected. And when terrorists fly planes into the building, everybody pays attention. People want to know who did it and what can we do to ensure that it never happens again. But Muslim Brotherhood front groups use stealth jihad or civilization jihad, which is much more pernicious because it slips under the radar unnoticed. But make no mistake about it, Muslim Brotherhood front groups have the exact same goals as core Al-Qaeda and other Islamic terrorist groups. They use only different tactics. Their goals are the reinstallment of a global caliphate and the implementation of Sharia law on a worldwide scale to which both Muslims and non-Muslims would have to submit. The Muslim Brotherhood motto, which was formulated in 1928 during its founding in Egypt and which remains the same to this day, there's no moderate Muslim Brotherhood, is the Allah is our purpose, the Prophet our leader, the Quran our constitution, jihad our way, and dying for the sake of Allah our supreme objective. During the 2008 Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terror financing trial in the history of the United States, the prosecution entered into evidence without objection from the defense the 1991 explanatory memorandum, which is a strategy for the Muslim Brotherhood strategy in North America. It says that they're here to achieve a civilization jihadist process. That and other documents were obtained through an FBI raid that occurred here in Annandale, Virginia. It explains that their work in America is, quote, a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of believers so that it is eliminated and that Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. That document also lists 29 Muslim Brotherhood affiliates which are operating here in America. Those groups are not here to be equal to other religions. Those groups are not here to assimilate. They're here with an agenda to dominate and to make you submit to Sharia law. And yet, the media, academia, churches, and even our government present those groups as the face of moderation, simply because they don't engage in outright violence. Some of the tactics they do engage in are frivolous lawsuits designed to bleed you dry, infiltration into the government, conducting influence operations, pressuring organizations to cancel speakers, name-calling, you're a bigot or an Islamophobe, reputation smearing, harassment, intimidation, veiled threats, worldwide boycotts of companies, strong-arming, phone, email, and letter-writing campaigns that paralyze companies, deception, misinformation, disinformation, claims of victimhood, and demands for special preferences in the workplace, and lobbying against all counterterrorism efforts in both the legislature and the executive branches. Imagine, if you can, an America where corporations change their products, their package designs, and even their own internal production procedures in capitulation to Islamist demands. Imagine an America where prestigious universities intentionally indoctrinate students with false information about Sharia law and Islamist goals, and where public schools brainwash children with textbooks that totally rewrite history. Imagine an America where Hollywood portrays terrorists as anybody except for Muslims, and where TV shows and film producers change their scripts in order to meet Islamist pressure groups. Imagine an America where public speakers, church leaders, prayer leaders, and even congressmen are afraid to express their viewpoints or opinions due to fear of being called an Islamophobic bigot. They can't even ask questions about legitimate critical issues such as Islamic terrorism, Islamic persecution of religious minorities, or human rights violations committed in the name of Islam. But most importantly, I want you, if you can, to imagine an America where government agencies that were designed to protect American citizens in matters of national security voluntarily reduce their own ability to do exactly that, based on advice from Islamists. Islamists who often have no interest or background in American national security. Imagine all of that. I wish I could tell you that the Orwellian picture of America, which I just depicted, will be the future America if you don't wake up soon. But the truth is, the picture I just painted is the America we live in now, but you just don't know it because the media doesn't report it. I'm going to give you a few examples of how of specific things these groups are doing. Most of my examples are going to come from CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, which, by the way, was also an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. In 1996, Nike came out with a then new sneaker called Nike Air. A Muslim thought that the logo, the word Air, kind of looked like the word Allah in Arabic. When CARE found out about it, it made numerous demands from Nike, which at first it resisted. But eventually, after being threatened with a worldwide boycott, not only of the sneaker, but of its entire corporation, and they have a large Middle Eastern market, they capitulated on every demand. They made a global recall of all the sneakers that were already on the shelves and totally ate the costs. They changed their own internal production procedures to ensure that future design logos would be, quote-unquote, sensitive to Islam, and they consulted CARE when doing so, and they donated tens of thousands of dollars to Islamic mosques, to Islamic charities, to Islamic playgrounds, and they sponsored Islamic events. Some of that money went to Dar al-Hijra in Falls Church, Virginia. Liz Claiborne owns DKNY jeans. They came out with a jean that had a verse from the Quran on the back pocket. CARE told them this is blasphemy, because when you sit down, it's like sitting on the Quran. They demanded that Liz Claiborne make an apology to all Muslims worldwide, that they change their design process for clothing in the future, that they submit their employees to sensitivity training, and that they dispose of the jeans in a Sharia-compliant manner. For those of you who don't know, Sharia law just means Islamic law. They required that the jeans should be burned instead of merely discarded. Liz Claiborne capitulated on every single one of these points. CARE also has had a long-standing campaign against Michael Savage for his quote-unquote Islamophobic rhetoric. They have an email list where they send out action alerts. And they sent out an alert telling their members to write letters to Michael Savage's sponsors and pressure them to yank their commercials from the air. 20 corporations pulled their ads from his show, including JCPenney, Geico, Sears, Walmart, Sprint, OfficeMax, and others. CARE then started a campaign called the Hate Hurts America campaign. You might see some people with those bumper stickers in their window. Its target is conservative radio shows, and its goal is to get those shows pulled from the air instead of just countering the viewpoints that are expressed. CARE also protests any movie that portrays anything to do with Islamic terrorists. For example, in 2001, prior to 9/11, Paramount Pictures was scheduled to come out with a movie called The Sum of All Fears. It's based on a book by Tom Clancy, and the plot was Muslim terrorists were going to shoot down an Israeli plane that had nuclear weapons when it was flying over Syria. When CARE caught wind of this script, they pressured the producers for years before the film was even released, saying that the script shows a, quote, negative stereotyping of Muslims. Eventually, the producers gave in and changed the script to be Australian neo-Nazis. In the workplace, CARE has regular conduct of filing a multitude of EEOC claims. EEOC claims are equal employment opportunity claims. When there is a claim of discrimination in the workplace, you cannot just go to federal court and file a lawsuit. First, you have to go to the federal agency, the EEOC, and file a claim. And they'll do an investigation and determine whether or not they give you permission to file a suit so that a jury can make the determination as to whether or not there was discrimination. CARE actually solicits these complaints on its websites in many of its chapters, not all of them, but many. Diane's Cupcakes is an organization that is owned by the Heinz Corporation. This company already made several concessions to their Muslim employees by providing 2 prayer rooms on the work site and scheduled times during which they could say their Islamic prayers. Obviously, you can't have them praying any time they want and just leaving the premises, but these accommodations weren't enough for some of the Muslim employees in the company, and they decided to leave outside those scheduled breaks to pray. Accordingly, they were fired, and CARE filed an EEOC claim on their behalf claiming religious discrimination. Though the agency gave them a letter giving them permission to file a lawsuit, they declined and instead decided to negotiate a settlement, something they do often, I think, because they don't believe they're going to win the case. In any event, they settled the negotiated a settlement, and they issued 2 press releases insinuating that the company had engaged in, quote, illegal discrimination and illegal activity, when in fact there was no such legal determination ever made. In the area of national security, CARE does 2 things. One is it tries to stifle any speech that pertains to Islamic terrorism, totally denying the fact that there is such a thing, and dissociating any interpretation of Islam with terrorism on one hand, but on the other hand, it tries to get national security procedures changed so that the Islamic terrorists can further their aims. For example, CARE has had a long-standing fight against the New York Police Department. The New York Police Department, well, in 2008, a film came out called The Third Jihad, Radical Islam's Vision for America. This film interviewed several credible national security experts, including the former CIA Director James Woolsey, former Mayor Giuliani, and Mitt Romney's counterterrorism advisor, Walid Perez, and also the New York Police Commissioner, Ray Kelly, who, by the way, was one of my clients. They used this film in their counterterrorism training program. CARE found out about it and pressured the NYPD to drop the film, claiming that it was, quote, biased. Notice they said biased, not false, because to them, anything that associates any interpretation of Islam with terrorism is biased. And it waged a campaign to have that film dropped. Eventually, they did drop it in 2011, but CARE wasn't satisfied and demanded that Ray Kelly resign. They claimed that he was involved in a, quote, anti-Islam film cover-up, to which they were only referring to the fact that he didn't offer the information that he was one of the people interviewed in the film. But the truth of the matter is, the NYPD had one of the best counterterrorism programs in the entire country. And when CARE found out that the police department was surveilling mosques in New York City and the Muslim community, they said that they were targeted, quote, solely for practicing their religion, when the truth is it had absolutely nothing to do with religion. They were targeted based on leads of suspicious activity. You might remember the case of the flying imams in 2006. 2006, there were 6 imams who were coming back from a conference called the North American Imams Conference, which, by the way, was headed by a guy who had terrorist ties. The imams were planning to board a U.S. Airways flight from Minneapolis to Phoenix. But in the meantime, they engaged in very bizarre behavior that drew attention to themselves. They started praying out loud in the lobby, even though there was a chapel that they could have gone to. They got on the plane and took the wrong seats instead of their assigned seats. They engaged in very loud Arabic conversations on the phone, and they started screaming out comments that were anti-American and pro-Osama bin Laden. Several of the passengers expressed concern, and the imams were removed from the plane. Immediately, they contacted CARE, and through CARE, they hired a CARE-affiliated lawyer and filed a lawsuit claiming religious discrimination, which in effect was saying that Muslims should be exempt from questioning when engaged in suspicious activity. And CARE paid for all the litigation expenses, by the way. Eventually, the lawsuit was dropped due to heavy criticism and public pressure, and instead they negotiated a settlement. The settlement was that money went to all 6 imams, even though several of them had terrorist ties. Subsequently, Congress passed a law that gave protection to future passengers who, in good faith, reported suspicious activity on flights. Naturally, CARE opposed that legislation. These examples are not anomalous. Companies that you do business with every day, including Burger King, Bank of America, MasterCard, Life Magazine, and UPS, have all been threatened with boycotts or demands for retractions, and most of them have capitulated. Disney, JBS Swift, and Electrolux have been threatened with discrimination lawsuits, and most of them have made concessions, mostly providing Muslims with prayer times and prayer rooms on the workplace. Simon & Schuster Publishing, U.S. News & World Report, and the Philadelphia Inquirer have all been threatened for material that they publish or were planning to publish. Public speakers, including Robert Spencer, Noni Darwish, Joe Kaufman, Bruce Teff, Paul Harvey, and Juan Williams, have either been threatened, shut down, or fired due to pressure from Muslim Brotherhood friend groups for speech that is constitutionally protected. Universities like Georgetown, Harvard, and Berkeley offer an onslaught of pro-Islam classes, workshops, and seminars, all funded by our friends Saudi Arabia. And using your taxpayer dollars, this administration has had the CIA, FBI, State Department, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Justice totally rewrite their national security and counterterrorism training programs, completely purging them from all mention of Islamic terrorism or Islamist ideology. National security professionals are no longer learning about the goals, motivations, and strategies of Islamic terrorists. but instead are taught to focus on terrorist behavior and, quote, de-link it from the underlying ideology that motivates it. Additionally, while government agencies are bogged down with paperwork complying with CARE's numerous FOIA requests, and while the FBI is busy investigating investigators for Islamophobia, their personnel, money, and time is unavailable to surveil, monitor, and investigate the dangerous activities of Islamists. All of these examples amount to nothing less than influence operations designed to protect Islam from so-called defamation, to Islamize the workplace and other societal institutions, and to undermine American national security. Instead of pandering to Muslim Brotherhood front groups, we should be calling them out for what they are: enemies of freedom who want to subvert the very Constitution they invoke to defeat us. National security agencies should be redoubling their efforts to train counterterrorism professionals in the motivations, strategies, and goals of CARE and its cohorts. The State Department should really designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Egypt recently did it. Why can't we? But if not, at the very least, we should strip them of their 501c3 status and force them to become transparent about their foreign donors. Law enforcement, academia, media, and churches should cut all ties with Muslim Brotherhood front groups and stop pretending that they're peace-loving victims when many of their leadership sit in jail convicted on terrorist-related charges. But most importantly, it's critical that we refuse to remain silent on this issue. We are in a war. It's not a military war, even though there's a military component. It's not a war on terror. Terrorism is just a tactic. It's freedom versus tyranny. It's liberty versus Sharia law. It is a war of ideas. The mind is the battlefield, and information is the arsenal. We cannot win this war if we are precluded from having an honest and open debate about the true nature of our enemy, even if it's cloaked in the language of religion. The most important point I want you to take away from this presentation is that there is a network of Islamist organizations intent to steal America's freedom. Using the veneers of political correctness, multiculturalism, and even religious freedom, they use the technique of incrementalism to slowly but surely achieve their supremacist goals. All of you in the audience need to become vigilant. Educate your family, your friends, your coworkers, and your neighbors. Stop those interfaith bullcrap seminars that usually have one of these guys on the panel providing disinformation. If you can, join your school boards, because they're changing all the textbooks and changing what history is. Make sure you elect officials who understand these issues and are on the right side of them. 2 years ago, President Obama asserted at the United Nations, quote, "The future does not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam," unquote. But I'm here to tell you that the future belongs to your children and your children's children no matter what. So there's only one question that remains, which is, what kind of future will you bequeath to them? Are you going to leave them with an America that celebrates freedom, equality, and human rights? Or are you going to sit on your butt while Muslim Brotherhood front groups quietly steal freedom out from under them without ever having fired a shot? The decision is up to you. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions. If anyone has questions.
Yeah. I was just going to make a comment, and I'm sure you've done lots of research. There's lots of criticism. I don't know who in here watches the Fives, but they blast every Muslim organization.
Who in here watches what?
The Five. The Five. And they don't have any bones about doing it. I have never heard them express being threatened or being boycotted. So I think thus far they're getting away with it.
Okay.
And the other thing is, you said that history books are being rewritten. Do you have examples of that?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but Citizens for National Security has issued an entire report, and there are some other reports, I think, in the making, going by which school districts, which states, which whatever. But a lot of these, sometimes they join the school boards, and they're they're just slanting everything to like, I can tell you I was a substitute teacher at some high school, and I just wasn't going to use the book that they gave me because it was just, you know, pro-Islam, and it's not supposed to be a religious class in public school. You can learn about religions as a matter of history. But the way they taught it was like, Muhammad is the prophet. This is the, you know, and then when it came to Christianity and Judaism, it was like one paragraph, and they made it sound like, well, this is what they believe. I can give you one example. In California, in the public schools,
That doesn't surprise me.
in the public schools, they had a field trip where they took students to a mosque. They had to wear Islamic garb, and they had to take on an Islamic name and say Islamic prayers. And so, I mean, they didn't do that for churches or synagogues, so that's one example, but there are many, many more.
I was going to say the reason that Fox is okay is because they are so popular. They're the only cable station that's making a profit. So they don't care who, the people that are sponsoring them, the products, they just want to make money. Because CNN is almost, they're going to have to go off, they're afraid. They've had to fire so many people, they just announced.
That's a crying shame.
I wasn't saying that every single person or every single company gets threats. You know, like knock on wood, so far I haven't. But,
They're not knuckling under all these companies.
pardon?
I mean, all these companies you mentioned, they're not knuckling
They
under.
are. They are.
So you're saying like Nike is not still...
Nike changed, didn't you hear what I said?
I
They
did hear what you
recalled the
said.
product, they changed the design, they changed their internal procedures. Liz Claiborne burned the jeans. Yes, they are knuckling under. They absolutely are. That's my whole point.
They have to make money.
Every single one of them.
I'm just surprised that wasn't all over the press. I really...
Well, that's why I'm giving the presentation, because it's not in the press. You're not hearing about it. So I've taken it upon myself to let you know, and you can research it and confirm it.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, nobody's connecting the dots. I mean, most of those companies, they're not on some political mission. They just want to make a profit and survive. So, you know, it happens once here, it happens once here, it happens once there, and nobody's really connecting the dots and reporting it. My comment wasn't that every single organization, you know, it's happening to, but it's very widespread. And when you start researching it, I wrote a whole book on it. I have to tell you, it's extremely overwhelming. And just give me 1 second. There was something else I was planning to say. Oh, Fox News isn't quite as terrific as you think. They're better than the other channels, but it's a comparative statement. I will tell you that several years ago, when there were riots in Paris, you know, Paris and parts of Europe England have what they call no-go zones, which are totally controlled by Muslims, and they apply Sharia law, not the law of their country. Police are afraid to go into those zones. And initially, Fox News reported that they, you know, in the Islamic areas, but based on pressure, they did change it to the, like, Muslim, no, they didn't, they left out the word Muslim, and it was all of a sudden like the French youth or immigrant youth, and they used euphemisms. And part of the reason for that is Prince Talal of Saudi Arabia, the same guy who funds Georgetown's Muslim Christian Understanding Center, Muslim Christian, not Christian Muslim, okay? That same person owns about 10% of the stock in Fox. So, yes.
I was going to ask, have you talked to any reporters, employees of, you know, major newspapers or some of the networks as to what they think is why they don't cover these things?
I think...
Is it because they're true believers, or because do you know why they don't cover?
Well, I certainly don't have ESP, but I can give it a go. I mean, first of all, I think there's more than one reason. I think there are some people that really don't know anything about it, and they're just totally naive and ignorant. I can tell you that as somebody who's a survivor from the 9/11 attacks in New York, you go to the Upper West Side, it happened right in their backyard, and they're clueless. I was clueless until I came here and started studying this stuff. They think it's just a bunch of, you know, a couple of crazy guys that flew the planes into the building, and they really don't know. I think we are a very generous, compassionate society, certainly compared to the Middle East. A lot of us are operating on the false assumption that all religion is based on love, and hope and compassion. And that the only thing we're arguing over is who is the real God and what are the right rituals. It doesn't ever cross anyone's mind to think that there might really be an ideology that is really much more political in nature than religious and clothes itself in the language of religion and has at its root hatred. Hatred and inequality. I just don't think it crosses anyone's mind. And unless you actually decide that you're going to take a lot of your own time and explore the issue to find out the truth, as I did, you're going to be operating under that incorrect assumption, like Ben Affleck. You know? So that's one reason. The second reason is I think that there's an unholy alliance between leftists and Islamists. It sort of goes under the theory of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And as long as their goal is to, you know, destroy America, they can join forces to say how bad America is. I mean, have you heard on the air, I can't remember who it is now, where some of them actually will say that, you know, America is worse than certain Middle East countries because at least this one Middle East country has a female who's a prime minister, and how many have we had? In the meantime, it's always going to be an Islamist woman over there who wants the subjugation of all the other women. I mean, those sex slave, trade slaves, if you're familiar with ISIS, has engaged in the slave trade now with women. They're selling women for $10 a piece or less. Most of those slave trade groups are run by women. So, it really doesn't matter. But they're not, if you look at any of the leftist coalition groups, whether it's feminists or gays or whatever it is, they have a very domestic focus. I mean, if a man, if a slightly older man says to a woman at the workplace, oh, you have nice legs, oh, all hell breaks loose and they have to file a lawsuit. In the meantime, women are chained up in the Middle East, they're locked in their homes, they can't drive in Saudi Arabia, their testimony is worth half that of a man in every Middle East country, they're stoned to death for being raped and reporting it, and you don't hear a peep out of those women.
Yeah. I've been very curious about the American left and its relationship to CARE and others, and the kind of blindness, doublethink. Now, you have said that the American left has a very negative view about American society, and so they're happy to form a coalition with these people. I'm really struck by that the behavior of these Islamic states towards women they ignore. Can you explain a little further about it? Do you have any further explanation for how the left can ignore the world of Saudi Arabia and so forth?
I mean, I'm not really sure what else you want me to say about it. It's just, I don't think I have much more to add. I mean, the ACLU props up CARE all the time, and CARE has given the ACLU a few awards. I mean, do you think CARE stands for equality and freedom? Really? CARE supports Hamas. It supports Hezbollah. Its founding members were from the Islamic Association of Palestine and Hamas, both of which are state-designated terrorist organizations. They are an unindicted co-conspirator found to have been funneling money to the Holy Land Foundation, which is now frozen because it was presenting itself as a charity but found to be funneling money to terrorists. So, I mean, I don't know how I can describe what they're doing, and I gave you my two theses as to the reason, but I can't tell you more than that because obviously I can't relate to it. I believe in real freedom.
Yeah, the ACLU-CARE relationship is very interesting. So there are a number of lawsuits where ACLU has supported CARE's position.
CARE, they support, I don't know if it was specifically lawsuits, I'd have to go look it up, but they, have events together, they give each other awards, they have their lawyers work together, yeah. Yes?
Do you think that there's anything such as a moderate or pro-Western Muslim? Is that possible?
You know what, I'm going to part with some people who work on this issue, and I'm sure I'll be slammed for it, but the answer is yes. And I know a few. So I want to make the distinction between Islam and Muslims. In America and in the West, we tend to identify by our nationality. You know, whatever gender, religion you are, most of us, I think, in this room would say we're American, and that's what binds us together. In the Middle East and in Africa, that's not how they identify. They identify by their religion, by their tribe. They have a different way of what they consider their identity. So I have met people, not very many, but I do believe there are more people who identify themselves as Muslim. But you know what? They don't want to live under Sharia law any more than you or I do. The number one, you know, President Obama is so disingenuous, as I'm sure you already know. But you know, when he gave his speech about ISIS, saying that ISIS is neither Islamic nor a state. It's called the Islamic State, but it's not Islamic and it's not a state, right? Showing that he, first of all, knows nothing about this issue, and I could give a whole little speech about that comment. And then he said, oh, and Muslims are the biggest victims, which is very misleading. Sure, Muslims are the biggest victims, but which Muslims? The Muslims that don't comply with the strict interpretation of Sharia law. It's the Muslims that want to eschew the violence. It's the Muslims that do believe in free speech. It's the Muslims that believe you should have the freedom to choose your religion, including converting to a religion and leaving a religion. Those Muslims are the ones who are slaughtered by ISIS, by Al-Qaeda, by al-Nusra, by Hamas. Those are the Muslims that are slaughtered. They still consider themselves Muslim, but they're not Sharia compliant. They're not, you know, you can practice it. Like there's a guy I know who he considers himself religious, or says he is, and he believes in separation of mosque and state. You know, well, maybe I should backtrack for a minute. For any of you who don't know a lot about Islam, let's put it this way. I'm not going to be one of the people. A lot of people do say, oh, it's all Islam. But what I will tell you is it is the authoritative interpretation. All of the authoritative interpretations of Islam are like 70, 80, 90% in agreement on the main things. And so whether you want to call it authoritative Islam or whatever it is much more of a political ideology than a religion. We have in America separation of church and state, and in Islam and in the Muslim countries, they do not. They have Islam in its full-blown expression encompasses a judiciary, a financial system, an educational system. It's an entire system of a whole way of life that is all-encompassing. There are people who identify themselves as Muslim who would be fine to live in this country and only practice that aspect of Sharia that they're able to do in the confines of the Constitution. But it's going to be limited because there are parts of Sharia law that just do not jive with our Constitution. I mean, Saudi Arabia and a lot of every single Muslim country, including the most liberal, most secular Muslim countries, have two laws. One is you can't blaspheme Islam, and two is you cannot leave the religion. It's apostasy. That apostasy is a capital offense in every single one of those countries. Now, obviously, if they want that, that's not going to be America. So if they're willing to forgo, you know, we don't have amputations and beheadings, which are part and parcel of their criminal hudud code. So you'll have Muslims who might want parts of Sharia, they want to pray, they want to wear their headscarf, they want to do this, and maybe they don't want the amputations. Okay, but that's part of the religion that they're eschewing, and they might still identify themselves as Muslim. But if you want the whole thing, then there's a big conflict with our Constitution and our whole ideology of freedom. So I think part of what happens with the message, if you listen to that exchange with Bill Maher and Ben Affleck, is they conflate Muslims with Islam. And I think even when people talk, if you say something about Islam, certainly I've met a lot of Muslims, they'll hear Muslim. So what you're saying and what they're hearing aren't necessarily the same thing, and I think that's part of the problem. Yeah. I just want to say one other thing. If you followed the case of the blind sheikh and that conviction, the prosecutor on that case will tell you, they could not have gotten all the information that they needed to properly prosecute them if it weren't for people who identified as Muslim but eschewed aspects of their own religion. Yes?
There's a formerly Muslim woman who was from Holland who's come to the U.S. I'm trying to remember her name.
CLE.
Can you give me any comments? What's your view of her?
I think she's terrific.
And has she...
She has nice cheekbones, too. Isn't relevant.
Is there any difference between, is the slightest between what she's saying and what you're saying?
No.
No.
Not that I'm aware of. No. I mean, she's an atheist, but I don't think I addressed my personal spiritual beliefs, and I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's relevant. So you'll get people who are, I mean, you have those two people now on the left, Bill Maher and Sam Harris, who are aware of this. I'm not sure they're framing it properly, and they tend to frame it as against all religion. I mean, why would I even do that? Why would I even try to bash anybody's religion if I don't agree with it, as long as it doesn't interfere with my freedom and my rights? Your right to swing your hand stops at the tip of my nose. If you can do that in your religion, that's swell. And if your religion is going to mean that, you have to hang gays or stone adulterers or kill your daughter because she dated a Westerner, then no. And the answer is no. I don't think her views differ from mine. No. Yes?
Two things. People from CARE are often on the Megyn Kelly show. I don't know if you ever look at Megyn Kelly on at 9 o'clock on Fox. She's absolutely fantastic. She confronts on a whole lot of stuff that Fox usually doesn't confront. And they've had poor people going neck and neck with somebody on the other side. It's really fascinating. My question to you is, oftentimes you'll hear on these shows that if more moderate Muslims stepped forward to basically call out the radical folks on their philosophy, then things would change. What do you ascribe to that philosophy, or what do you think?
Obviously, there's a problem within the religion. Those who deny it are either ignorant of it or they're lying. I also think, by the way, there are a lot of people who call themselves Muslim who haven't even read the Quran, haven't read the Hadiths, and just believe whatever apologist crap they're hearing. There's a problem within their religion. It needs to be addressed. I don't feel that it's for me to address it, and to go into what's the right interpretation, wrong. But listen, if you look at the history of it, it's clear how things came out. But if there are Muslims who truly believe that it should be a different interpretation or is a different interpretation, then they shouldn't be telling third-party observers who are Christian, Jewish, atheists, and Buddhists, oh, that's not Islam, that's not Islam. They should be telling ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, oh, you're doing it all wrong. They should be telling them. Why are they telling me? I'm just observing and reporting. If these guys say that they're doing it, let's put it this way, we could at least say they're doing it in the name of Islam, and I see a lot of Muslim groups saying, oh, not in our name, not in our name, and then they get kudos from David Cameron or whomever, and what I hear when I hear not in our name, it's not a condemnation of terrorism and a fight to make them stop whatever they're doing. Just don't do it in our name. It's a defense of Islam. It's not a condemnation of the behavior. I think they would be wise to condemn the behavior to the extent that there really is any quote-unquote Islamophobia, and most of it is fabricated or misdefined. So that's a whole other lecture. To the extent that there really is any discrimination, if they, through their actions, showed that they had the same values of freedom, that they had the same values of being pro-Israel and not wanting to kill everybody, and if they showed through their actions, then that would disappear, instead of always making it about them. They turned 9/11 into about them. It wasn't about the 3,000 people that were murdered in cold blood. It was about, oh, there's going to be a backlash against Muslims. That's the big concern. If they're right, they should fix it. If they're wrong, I try not to get sidetracked in public conversations about is Islam a religion of peace. Because you want to know what? I don't really give a damn. Just stop flying the planes into the buildings. Stop trying to shut everybody up. Stop trying to take away our freedom, intimidating our business. Stop trying to take away everyone's rights, trample on American business, intimidate everyone to comply to what you want to do, and we'll be fine. You know, I mean, by having that conversation, it implies that the issue is the interpretation of Islam. Oh, well, if it's the right interpretation, then it's okay? No, it's not okay either way. And if it's the wrong interpretation, should we tell that to the people who are quote-unquote moderate Muslims, and they'll say, oh yeah, and then they'll become more radicalized? It's a no-win situation. I'm a lawyer. I know what our Constitution says. My goal is to maintain freedom in this country. Anything that conflicts with it is a problem. If it's a particular religion, I have no interest. Yeah, I have. I've wound up learning all about Islam. But the point is, I mean, why are we, as Christians and Jews and atheists, studying some particular religion? It's not relevant. Study the Constitution. Study the Declaration of Independence. Know what your rights are. And I can tell you how you know this is a political philosophy rather than a religion. You know, if you're any religion, you're free to practice it. But why should other people who do not subscribe to that faith have to comply with the rules of your religion? That's what they're trying to do, and that's how you know it's political. If to them it's some big, huge sin to draw a cartoon of Muhammad, well, great. No one's making them. But why should you be threatened with death threats or censored or whatever it is? Why should Nike have to change their sneaker? You know what? I think it's okay if there are groups or individuals who want to boycott that sneaker. That's what the free market of ideas is about. But they threaten to boycott the entire company, you know, and for example, with the radio shows. And that's freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They are totally free to have their own radio shows, their own podcasts, their own articles, their own blogs, saying, oh, you know what? I didn't really agree with Robert Spencer or Pamela Geller. I didn't really agree with Michael Savage or Glenn Beck. But they don't want to do that. They want to shut down the debate. And it has two purposes. One is it makes you comply with their religion on the issue of blasphemy laws. And two is it keeps you in the dark from knowing what's really going on in matters of national security. Because if you can't talk about Islamic terrorism, how are national security professionals going to come up with a strategy to defeat it? The young people in those organizations don't even know it exists. They don't understand the importance of learning the underlying ideology of the motivations of terrorists. It's not the same as thugs down the street, the way Eric Holder wants to make it like it's just a crime. We're in a war. Terrorism is not the same as an isolated thug down the street who should be tried and locked up. It would be like saying we're fighting Russia and not understanding that we're fighting communism. You need to know, if you want to catch terrorist acts in the bud, instead of waiting until after they happen to prosecute them, you need to understand what is their motivation, what is their strategy, what are their values. And they're stopping the conversation to keep the war fogged. So you don't know what's going on.
You know, of course, we've all seen this thing about that Australia, the country was very strong. Last night, the Prime Minister of Canada said it's terrorism, and yet we can't seem to say that.
That's right.
What is that?
It's political correctness. You know, it's political correctness.
Obama, so the thing is, he doesn't want America to remain strong? He thinks America should be.
I'll leave that up to you.
Do you have any statistics or information with respect to religious recruitment in prisons? Is there because there's a significant recruitment for there's a significant amount of recruitment for Islam. Are there more people recruited for Islam than perhaps converting to Christianity?
I think there are. I don't know the specific statistics for that, but I can tell you that part of it. There's an example of how ACLU helped. There was a certain program where they were going to try to not have the Korans in the prisons. Is that what we need? Korans in the prisons? More people converting to Islam? But ACLU made sure that the Korans would be available. And there is a lot of recruitment and conversion to Islam in the military. The military chaplain program was started by Al-Amudi, who did have an affiliation with CARE, also was one of the founders of the Muslim Students Association, started the military chaplains program, and made sure that the two organizations through which imams have to be approved are Muslim Brotherhood groups, including ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, another unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Now, eventually, he was a schmoozer in political circles around here, as was,
Isn't he appointed now? Isn't he one of the
No, he's in jail.
Oh, but one of his affiliates, I thought, was one of the senior advisors to the Pentagon.
Oh, there's plenty of them. I have a whole list here of people who are have infiltrated the government and who are running programs they have no business running and have clearances they have no business having. But Al-Amoudi used to be a political operative around here and was a big schmoozer. Eventually, he was caught and indicted and jailed on a 23-year terrorist-related charge. But that didn't make the Pentagon change their program.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Is it true that Hillary Clinton's chief of staff is a
Huma Abedin, yeah.
right,
Well,
married to the...
her whole family, is she married to
the guy that did all the...
Her whole family, her whole family is a bunch of Muslim Brotherhood, has a bunch of Muslim Brotherhood ties.
But she works for Hillary Clinton. It's like,
Right.
that's a brainer to me.
All right, any other,
One more question.
Just in defense of the Pentagon, they only follow orders, and I call the military the great social experiment. They can deem whatever it is elementary they have to do, military, they have to accept this, they have to do this, they have to do that, and they do it.
they follow orders from whom? I'm not sure what you're saying.
It comes from the president. They're not in charge. They just follow
No,
the
actually,
orders.
my understanding is the military makes their own rules. A lot of the guard.
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They don't.
You're
wrong. They don't.
Well, the generals work for the president.
They work for the president.
Generals in the army.
They are mandated. They are told what they
At the
have
pleasure of
to
the president.
incorporate. They are told when they have to put this on post. They are told when they have to have a program, even if they can't afford it.
Okay, well, the program
Everything is
that was
mandated
erected...
from the not the military side, but from, I guess, political appointees who get important positions, and they decide they have an ideation of what
I
they
wasn't
want.
saying it was specifically the military side. All I know is that the Pentagon came up with this program that was implemented by Al-Amoudi, and whomever is the one that makes the decisions on that, when the guy is sent to jail on a 23-year conviction, don't you think you should take a look at that and maybe change it? Whomever it is, it still remains there.
Well, I'm just saying, they don't have that option. They are required to execute what they are told they have to do.
They use the option to
As
resign.
in the soldier, or in Navy.
I'm not saying it's the soldiers.
What I'm saying is down within the active military, okay? You have a Pentagon that has a lot of civilian, a lot of people who have their own ideas. They haven't been in the military.
I'm not saying it's the soldiers.
Okay, right.
I'm not
But
saying
all I'm saying is that, we have to say, these are officials, okay? Officials of the Pentagon deem these kind of things.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought that was a given. I'm not talking about the soldiers. Soldiers don't make policy. I know
I
that.
said exactly.
Oh, I know that, and I assume
They're not going to
that-
not do it, okay? If they're told they have to do it, they will do it, okay?
Right, but the policymakers have a choice, and they made the wrong
Right.
choice. So no, I didn't mean it was the soldiers.
Yeah.
I just assumed
And,
people.
there are political appointees, a lot of this. It's not, it's not like, we get to elect someone to.
Right.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.
One more question, Pauline?
Yes. Could you please explain Takia and how they use it in order to misinform?
Sure. So they say there's no compulsion in religion, and what does that mean? First, you have to invite them into your religion. It's called Dawah. It's basically propaganda. I call it propaganda. It's Islamic evangelizing, asking them to convert. If they say no and they're Christian or Jewish, you give them the option of paying the jizya tax, which is a poll tax that shows that they're submitting and they can live in that country by the second-class citizens. And if they opt out on that, then you can kill them. So see, you do have choices. You do have choices in life. And one of the things that, it's a Judeo-Christian value, to be honest, but in Islam they have two concepts. One is called taqiyya, which is lying for the sake of the religion. If it's to further their cause, it's not only acceptable, but it's considered commendable. And the other one is called kitman, which is the omission of something for the same reason. So it's sort of like when you say, half the truth is a whole lie, that kind of thing. So you have a lot of that operating. So I think some of our political officials in Congress, when they hear these guys, they just listen to the words. The words might mean something different to these groups than they mean to us. They're also very naive. They don't explore any of the information. They just take things at face value, and that's why things are going the way they're going. So, but I hope you'll become I really hope you'll become a little active. I totally realize that most of you, you have your families, your jobs. You can't devote all of your time to this issue, the way I do or the way some other people do. But it's so important. I think there's just not enough people that know about it. And when you start studying it, it's so overwhelming. It's having such a big influence. And we have a tendency to sit on our butt and be complacent. Freedom, if you look around the world, is an exception. And if we lose it, it's not going to come back. So if you could just do one thing a week, bring a friend, send an article, or pick a target. I mean, there are so many churches that, Takia, a good example of that is a lot of these quote-unquote interfaith dialogues at churches. And they'll often have somebody who is from one of these groups telling you, oh, this has nothing to do with Islam, this is not, or for example, Georgetown is having a seminar in like a week or two, I just got the notice, so they can tell you how, well, gee, Muslims believe in Jesus too. They're just like you. They believe in Jesus. Of course, what they believe about Jesus is couldn't be more different than what any Christians believe about Jesus. But they, if you target, just pick something. Like I heard a woman whose church was having these I call them interfaith bullcrap seminars, because that's what they are. And, I mean, the purpose of them, they were started mostly by Muslim Brotherhood friend groups, who are doing it to brainwash people and disinform them. People who come to seminars who in good faith want to learn more, and they're given purposely incorrect information, right? She tried to talk to her pastor and got nowhere. So she wound up trying to inform other people in her congregation. And they all got together and threatened to leave. Oh, he listens then. So if you pick one group, your church, your PTA, your local election at the grassroots, pick something, and if you can just do one thing a week, anything toward that, because we need a citizen army if we want to keep America free.
Thank you, Deborah.